Hey guys, it's Marco again. In today's video, we'll be focusing on the best trinkets for frost mages for the current situation. Also taking into the account that almost all of the raid trinkets are going to get buffed. So let's quickly go over the buffs. Tome of Monstrous Constructions received an 8% buff to its damage output. Titanic Ocular Gland is giving 4.5% more secondary stats. Shadowed Orb of Torment received 61% buff to its active, and it finally gives a nice chunk of mastery. And lastly, the most complex trinket change happened to Ebon Soul Wise. The damage can now critically strike, it benefits from haste, and it deals damage as soon as you cast it. But its damage per tick has been reduced from 1324 to 781 damage. For my character, so focusing on my character's crit and haste stats, this will actually increase the damage of this active by 15%. That's all with the changes. Now let's go over which trinket is going to be the best for a variety of situations. Solo targets, cleave and AoE. Before I start, I have to say that I will completely neglect Imperial Ordnance, Sunblood Amethyst and Instructable Quantum Device. Because these trinkets are burst trinkets, which don't achieve a huge value for frost mages, and even now with 226 gear, 252 versions of these trinkets are a DPS loss for my character. For solo target situations and cleave fights where you're using freezing winds, you don't want to go too high with your critical strike chance, so you just want to get to the shatter cap. But boy do you want to go for critical when you're running glacial fragments. Sadly, this legendary isn't popular for today's raid, but you want to have it for Mythic Plus in fortified situations. So first, let's go with dungeon trinkets. For my character, 233 versions of Minuscule Male Elemental in an Envelope and Soul League's Secret Technique are an absolute hit for my character on solo target fights. That's why I recommend doing these dungeons before you get your hands on the heroic versions of the raid trinkets or some good Mythic Plus trinkets. For multiple targets, Male Elemental loses on its power, while Soul League is on the same level. Next up we have normal dungeon trinkets, and that's Satchel of Misbegotten Minions, Unbound Changeling and Infinitely Divisible Ooze. And these trinkets are all great source of constant damage, so if you see these bad boys in your weekly vault, yummy. From these trinkets, for solo targets, Satchel is the worst one, and difference between the Ooze and Unbound Changeling depends on your character. But usually Ooze wins on solo targets. But talking about AoE situations, Unbound Changeling starts winning at 3 targets, since again, pure damage trinkets start to drop in significance. But do bear in mind, they will still be good and close to Unbound Changeling, and Satchel will do increased damage to more targets, which keeps it quite viable. Also, one more trinket enters the fray, but only if you're using glacial fragments in 3+ target situations, and it's actually a bit better than Unbound Changeling. And that trinket is Soul-Letting Ruby. And for the most interesting trinkets, the raid trinkets. I already touched a bit on these with my predictions, and most of my predictions were right, except for the Wise. It is simming super low for some reason, but I will trust the simulations, so let's get started. The only raid trinket which you don't want to get is Shadowed Orb of Torment. Even though it's gonna get a hefty buff now, it's still a bad design and it offers the worst stat stick for Frosties. The trinket which impressed me the most was the Tome of Monstrous Constructions, and I really hope that this one will drop for me on my first mythic kill. Comparing this to Ooze Trinket actually wins, but that's the main reason why they will buff the raiding trinkets. And I believe that after the buff, these trinkets will be on the same level. But again, this trinket suffers from the same fate as other damage trinkets, the AoE situations. Then we have Titanic Ocular Gland from the Eye, which is a great trinket if you can keep your health bar above 50%. And in simulations, you're always above 50% HP. So even with this small buff to the trinket, I value that this trinket will be at the same level as Satchel. In AoE situations, it will remain on the same power level, close to Satchel, since stat stick trinkets do scale well with targets. Then we have the trinket which simulation disappointed me the most, and that's Ebon Soul Wise. It's not a great solo target DPS upgrade for me, but I will still keep an eye on it, especially after the buffs to it. And we don't need to talk about its weak AoE power. Lastly but not least, Forbidden Necromantic Tome, which is also kinda disappointing since it's giving us critical strike chance, and a well-geared Frost Mage is already near or at the shatter cap. So this trinket will usually give an overkill on critical, but it's still going to be superb, especially if you're missing critical. So if I get this trinket, I will probably tone down my critical, which might make this trinket the best one for solo targets. And I believe that this trinket will be by far the best one for AoE situations due to insane amount of critical strike chance. So for my character, who is a well-geared Frost Mage, certain dungeon trinkets are better than raid trinkets. So I advise you to click that like button as a good luck charm for your next weekly cash. And for conclusion, I also took the liberty of checking Toe Grinder Mage sims, to which I will leave a link in the description. And with that knowledge and my sims, I would rank the trinkets as following. For solo targets, rank 1 easily goes to Forbidden Necromantic Tome, since you can easily swap out your gear so you can lose a bit of critical strike chance, and this trinket is gonna give you a huge boost of it. Second best trinket is surprisingly the Ooze. Third one is Tome of Monstrous Constructions, which is super close to Ooze or might be a bit better. Fourth one is Unbound Changeling, a very good stat trinket which procs a lot. Fifth trinket is Satchel. Sixth one, in my opinion, is going to be Titanic Ocular Gland, but do keep in mind that this trinket can be a bit better than even Unbound Changeling, as long as you're above 50% HP. So for example, if you manage to be at 50% HP for the whole fight, I believe that this trinket is going to be better than Unbound Changeling. But I don't see when is that gonna happen. Lastly, for the seventh trinket, I'm gonna rank Ebon Soul Wise. Also, do bear in mind, I'm not ranking Tasavesh trinkets, since they're on a much lower item level, and they will only be good until we get the heroic versions of trinkets and good mythic plus trinkets. So now let's get on to Freezing Wind's Cleave. And in this ranking, Forbidden Necromantic Tome is still the rank 1 trinket. Second one, in my opinion, is now Unbound Changeling. Third one is the Ooze. Fourth one is Titanic Ocular Gland. And again, the same thing goes. If we can keep your health up, it should be at Unbound Changeling level or even a bit above. Fifth one should be Satchel, and this is only a 2 to 3 target cleave, so the increased damage of multiple targets still didn't catch up with the Ooze. Sixth one is a Tome of Monstrous Constructions. And lastly, for Glacial Fragments Cleave and AoE. As a total surprise, I'm still gonna rank Forbidden Necromantic Tome as the best trinket. Second one is going to be Soul Letting Ruby, just because of the amount of critical strike chance it gives. Third one is going to be Unbound Changeling. Fourth one is Titanic Ocular Gland. Fifth one is going to be Satchel. And sixth one is the Ooze. But just remember, these are all the best Frostmage trinkets, and their difference in power isn't that huge, and you should always sim your own character. So do bear in mind that this isn't a strict guide, it's more of a guideline on what to use in which situations. That's all for this video, and I will leave a script of this video which is available for download on my Patreon page. Patreon isn't mandatory, it's optional, and I'm also offering a permanent room for you in my Discord channel when you subscribe there. Also, I'm offering all sorts of coaching and more helping with vlogs. So if you find the Patreon perks worth of your time and money, consider supporting my efforts there. Special shout out to my current Patreons. Thank you for your continued support. Mentioned links are in the description, and until next time, take care.